Good afternoon, everyone. My name is DM Rawlings. I am the 10-Minute DM. I'm an experienced Forged in the Dark GM, and I'm here to offer some advice 10 minutes at a time. So today, I want to talk about Critical Role's second episode of Candela Obscura. In no particular order, I'll point out 3 things that I really liked during the session, and then 3 opportunities worth discussing from watching on Thursday. So to kick things off, first thing that I liked was we are talking about stakes. In the first episode of Candela Obscura, the stakes of any action roll only came up 3 times. But in the second, it was everywhere. Both the players and Matt were bringing this up consistently throughout the session, and stakes are really important because they tell us how severe consequences will be if you get a 1 to 5, but it also gives us a sense of how much danger the characters are in, which is a way of driving tension during sessions. So a GM should be explicit about stakes so that a player knows how badly a roll could go and is informed enough in advance to wisely spend the resources like drive and whatnot that they have in order to frame the story the way that they want. In terms of opportunities, I thought that there were some really unclear consequences during the session, and I wanted to talk about how those consequences were applied. It's one of the reasons why I made a video on the action roll. I'll try and put that over here. In many cases, you're going to see in the session when you watch it that there was a 1 to 3 or a 4 to 5 result, and the action in the scene would just continue. And then maybe several seconds or maybe minutes later, something bad would happen to the players. And the thing is, characters have this thing on their character sheet, which gives them the ability to resist. They're going to reroll dice equal to their action, and possibly reframe the outcome. But how can a character know when they should resist if they don't know what they're resisting? Sure, maybe they just want to succeed, so they'll be trying to get a 1 to 3 to a 4+, but they could just as much be trying to avoid a consequence by turning a 4 to 5 into a 6. And I've mentioned this before, but resistance is already far weaker in Candela Obscura than it is in Blades in the Dark, so I'd be really encouraging you to be explicit with your consequences so that the players can make informed choices. And what do I mean by that? Literally at a table, I'll say things like, you rolled a 4. You get what you want, but the guards notice. And then we go into the scene and we show the guards noticing, but there's that opportunity there for a player to step in and say, you know what, I don't want that to happen. I'm going to try to resist that. So, on to number 2, player contributions. There's a moment in the session where Anjali is making a sway roll to appeal to a priest. And after rolling a success with a consequence, she suggests, maybe I can make a donation. This is great. This is awesome. This is what Forged in the Dark is all about, is having players step forward and try to be part of the narrative. So when a Forged in the Dark game is firing on all cylinders, the players are giving as much detail as the GM is. And this is that writing room concept that I've talked about in a few other videos, but a really great example where Anjali screaming at Matt to say, hey, here is a consequence that makes a lot of sense given the fiction of the scenario right now, and I think this should be what happens. And Matt went with it, and I think that it worked really well. So when players are offering up their own consequences, they're able to do far more, find more interesting things than a GM ever could alone, and that makes the game better and more engaging for everyone at the table. So I highly recommend having players step up and suggest consequences and things like that to make the game better. Opportunity number 2. I'm saying mess around and find out. During the initial briefing of the second session, the Lightkeeper specifically said, time is critical on this one. So what does the group do? They go to the scene, they got turned away by the periphery, they didn't find out that much in the alley, and then they left the scene to go off and question a witness that they'd heard about. And this means that they waited over an hour before coming back to the scene where things happened, and as a result, in what we saw in the session, nothing really changed during that intervening time. It didn't feel like things were worse because that decision was made. And this very much was a choice that the players made. They still had options to explore, maybe get up the firewalk, maybe break in through a back door, any number of things that could have got them onto the scene. And as such, it's really worth noting that the story doesn't stick around waiting all day for the characters to cross an imaginary threshold and trigger some kind of cutscene. Time moves on. And like how? Maybe the Office of Unexplained Phenomena was already on the 6th floor when they get back. Or maybe the OUP had evidence in boxes and they were just leaving the facility, the scene of the crime, as the party returned. Or maybe instead of the OUP, it was the Exoteric Order of New Sciences. That's something that raises the stakes. And that's really the point of this, is when players don't take that part of the fiction seriously, then as a GM we have things that we can do to make things more stressful for them if they don't opt into those difficult circumstances. So we set the parameters for what's important as a GM, and when the characters don't meet those parameters, things should get worse for them. Third thing that I liked: embracing scars. Scars are the coolest idea in Candela Obscura, and this session we got to see 3 of them. Scars let you take your character in new, fun, unexplored directions, and there's just a ton of creative space for players to run with scars in all kinds of imaginative ways. I think Robbie in particular just nailed it with how he did his, and I absolutely loved it. So remember, these campaigns are really short. The thing that we're going to get on stream is only going to be 3 sessions, but if you're running this at home, generally you're not going to be playing for more than, say, 12 sessions. So feel free to push really hard with your character. It's really hard to fill up those scar boxes, so don't fear getting them. Instead, use them as opportunities to do fun, cool things with your characters. And it was great to see that on stream when characters bumbled into that. So, opportunity number 3. I thought there were too many roles this session, and that's something that I think you improve over time as you run more games. In a Forged in the Dark game, every single role carries weight. Generally, the default stakes of your rolls are going to be normal unless there's a compelling reason to move them up or down. And what we want to do is use less rolls to accomplish more within the story. So I did a count of all the rolls, and by my count there were 30 in the session. Anjali had almost half of them with 14, Robbie had 8, Laura 5, Ashley 3. I really would have loved there to be closer to 25. And I think the principal troublemaker here was that there were just a lot of perception, insight, lore checks, and most of these are low or no consequence rolls. Many of them focus on the act, like I want to perceive, and not the outcome of this is what I want my perception to accomplish. And in a lot of ways, these are holdovers from coming from a D&D background. And just kind of to go with that, I noticed during this session that the pacing of the story really seemed to stall out kind of in the middle bit due to the outcome of a few bad rolls. So when you start locking progress behind rolls, then you can get yourself into those kind of situations. Maybe a couple examples. There was a scene in the alleyway. Laura rolled to see how someone in the alleyway felt. Like they were agitated, etc., etc. It was kind of like an insight thing. Laura rolled to see what someone was holding. It was more of a perception kind of thing. As a GM, when people call for those kind of rolls, I want to get more information. You know, what are you trying to accomplish here by doing this? If it's an insight roll, are you trying to earn their trust? Do you want them to open up to you a little bit more? It's not the act of going, oh, they're nervous. That knowing that they're nervous is a method of getting to an outcome. What we want to make a roll for is we want to include that, roll that into the outcome if we can. And for the perception check, I genuinely feel like that was a no-stakes roll, and I'm inclined to just answer them outright. Oh, they're carrying this, or they're clutching something that's too close to see. You're not going to be able to just make a perception check. Or, if you're really into some more advanced stuff, feel free as the GM to ask the player, what do you think they're carrying? And then incorporate that answer into the story. So, just in closing here, I want to say I love that session. There's a lot of really cool things that happened. I'm eager to catch the conclusion in a few weeks' time. But I do hope that this video gives you an opportunity to see how I approach these kind of situations and the kind of things that I see, and maybe that can roll into how you tell these kind of games. Anyways, I've been DM Rawlings, the 10-Minute DM, and if you like what you see here, please do me a favor and subscribe.